Hello everyone, I'm Emily Stoehrer, the Rita J. Kaplan and Susan B. Kaplan Curator of Jewelry at the Museum of Fine Arts, Boston. It's my pleasure to be with you today to talk about the role that women play in the creativity, consumption, and enjoyment of high jewelry. Last year, 2020, marked the 100th anniversary of women's suffrage in the United States. The milestone was set to be marked with exhibitions, events, and programs dedicated to women in the arts. COVID-19 derailed much of those events, but virtual events like this one have provided a platform to explore the subject, perhaps in a deeper way. Jewelry has historically been a man's world, but women have long participated in the field as artists, designers, collectors, and tastemakers. Recent scholarship has highlighted the achievements of some of these women, but there's still a lot to learn. Over the next hour, you'll hear from some very distinguished speakers for what I'm sure will be a fascinating conversation. Joining us from London is Jessica McCormack, a London-based jeweler and founder, creative director of her eponymous company. She is known for merging modern design with traditional techniques and expert craftsmanship to create jewelry that's truly wearable. Jessica McCormack jewelry frequently graces the cover of glossy magazines, and Jessica's clients include Zoe Kravitz, Victoria Beckham, Zoe Huntington-Whiteley, the Duchess of Sussex, Bette Midler, and Rihanna. Welcome, Jessica.
Hi, thanks for having me.
And usually in London, but today joining us from New York is Melanie Grant. Melanie is the luxury editor of 1843 magazine, The Economist's lifestyle sister publication, where she edits the annual jewelry supplement. Her first book, Coveted, Art and Innovation in High Jewelry, was published last year by Phaidon. She also writes for Vogue, Vanity Fair, and Tatler, and is a guest lecturer at Central St. Martin's, as well as a guest crit leader at Royal College of Art. Welcome, Melanie.
Hi, Emily. Hi, everyone. Lovely to be here.
Hi. And last but certainly not least, also joining from New York is Frank Everett, Senior Vice President and Sales Director of Jewelry at SOTHEBY'S, where he's overseen numerous prestigious jewelry sales. He's an expert on design and history of great period jewels and the women who wore them. Welcome, Frank.
Good morning, good afternoon. Thank you very much. It's nice to be here.
It's great to have you all here. Thank you. Let's get started, and I would love to hear from each of you about what made you fall in love with jewelry. Jessica, why don't you start us off?
Well, my father was an antiques dealer in New Zealand, and so he definitely inspired my love of jewelry. And he used to take me to auction houses in the South Island of New Zealand, and I would kind of buy fishing tackle boxes full of costume jewelry, and that's really where my love affair started. And then in my mid-20s, I actually did an internship at Sotheby's in the jewelry department. And that's where I saw Russian crown jewels, 1920s Cartier, Lalique, Belperon, and yeah, the rest is history.
Did you work with Frank?
I didn't work with Frank because I was in London, and it was a very long time ago. As I said, it was in my mid-20s, so a long time ago now.
And Mel, how about you?
Well, like Jessica, I was definitely inspired by a family member. My grandma sort of collected vintage silver and costume jewellery. And you know, when you're a kid, no one lets you touch anything nice. And she used to let me sort of play with her jewellery, and she had a fantastic rose garden, and she used to prune the roses, and I used to sort of twirl around in all her best things. And I just remember that as a time of such sort of beauty and sort of excitement, because, you know, we used to sort of hang out together. And I think I always tried to sort of recreate that. So jewellery has always drawn me to it for that sort of happiness. I think it just brings this joy to people's lives.
I love that. Jewelry is this great vehicle for memory, and for so many people,
Yeah.
that's what brings us to jewelry. And Frank, how about you?
Well, certainly both my grandmothers had nice collections and very different taste. You know, I had one grandmother who had very kind of simple, delicate Tiffany type things, platinum and diamond. And then my other grandmother really favored very chunky gold. She was a New Yorker and wore, you know, Siemens chunky gold bracelets and things like that. But I'd say the real start was my Aunt Dorothy, who was very glamorous and had a 10-carat emerald cut diamond ring. And it was from the time I was very young, I just was obsessed with that ring, and I would hold her hand and look at that. They should have known early on where I'd end up, because I was obsessed with that ring and kind of still am.
Love that. So the topic today is women in jewelry. So what woman, as a, it could be a collector, artist, craftsperson, designer, most influences and inspires you today? Mel, do you want to kick that one off?
Yeah, I mean, you could say it's an obvious answer, but obviously one of my favorite female designers is Belle Perron, because she was such a force. She came from nothing. She became one of the best designers of all time. She was in the French Resistance. She fought the Nazis. She just didn't do what anyone told her to do. At a time where women didn't work, she worked she created this style which was so powerful that she didn't sign her pieces. And, I say in the book that she's a goddess, and I really believe that. Her work was wonderfully kind of just simple, but a lot, in terms of design. She shedded a lot of stones. These rings are the yin yang rings, two of my favorite rings. They're just so modern now, they were made in the 20s. So I love her. There was also a sculptor.
I love her work.
I think all of us would probably agree that she's one of the greatest designers.
I think most people just are so mesmerized.
Yeah, and then Augusta Savage, who was possibly not that well known. She was a sculptor, and she was connected to the Harlem Renaissance in the 30s. She was 7th of 14 children. Her father was a minister, and he told her, you can't be an artist, it's not what women do. And she just became a civil rights activist. And she was on this mission to sort of democratize the arts in 1930s New York. And I love what she represented. She just challenged the existing hierarchy. And so for me, those two women really sum up sort of like the kinds of people who inspire me.
What a great picture that is. I love seeing her looking at, is that her sculpture that she's staring at?
Yeah,
it's beautiful. And Frank, your great inspiration is Elsa Peretti, right?
Yes, I would want to just kind of echo a few of the things that Mel said about Belle Perron, because you can't have this conversation without talking about Suzanne Belle Perron for so many reasons. A true maverick as a designer, as a businesswoman, and as a human being. Starting at the House of Boivin, which a lot of people don't know really was a woman-run business, because René Boivin himself died so young, and his wife ran the show, and then hired a very young Suzanne Belle Perron, where she started out. Then she went out on her own, and just she was always ahead of the curve. When you look at early pieces that look deco, when people were still doing kind of Edwardian and Belle Epoque looking things, and she was always ahead of the curve with her modernist designs. And then her business model, I think, really relying on women clients and women editors to help build her business. It was a very bespoke kind of upstairs shop. She didn't have a proper storefront on street level, and she was just a really amazing person. The way she built a brand and created her design oeuvre, if you will. So you can't really start with anyone but Belle Perron. But then when you fast forward to Elsa Peretti, she really is just such a hero of mine, because she comes from that 1970s New York City world of art and creative people that were doing all kinds of things. I think people came to New York City at that time and they explored everything from photography to painting to sculpture and jewelry making. And she was a model, and she worked very closely with Halston, as we all know now from the recent Netflix series. But she was just a true artist that at some point happened to start making jewelry. And when we use the word iconic, I think there are so many designs of Peretti's that you could call iconic. I don't even really say it anymore. Between the open heart and the fabulous perfume bottle and the incredible bone cuffs, which I think still hold the record. The bone cuffs have been on the cover of Vogue every decade since they were made. And that's iconic, to think of something being 40, 50 years in and still being modern and fresh. So Peretti was just an amazing woman, an amazing artist, and an amazing jewelry designer. Sad to have lost her this year, but nice that awareness has been so raised. So I just really am a huge admirer and am inspired by Peretti.
I think she's been called the most important woman designer of the 20th century, and I think that she certainly is. And it's great to see her celebrated in so many events recently.
And she
Jessica,
certainly
who
knew how to cut a
inspires
business
you?
deal, that's for sure.
I echo Mel and Frank with Belperon, and also I love, that her business model of selling to women and her bespoke kind of style, which that's something that I kind of started doing with my business. Also, I'm really inspired by art and artists, and I'm very lucky to have a couple of Louise Bourgeois pieces here in London. We had both of these pieces here, and what I loved about her was her kind of connection to the pieces, which I can kind of relate to with the jewelry, where I can feel that I don't want to sell a piece of jewelry. And her totems almost became like her friends. They were kind of, a part of her world. And so that's something I really, can relate to. So I think, she's amazing as an artist.
Thank you. So Mel, your book Coveted is exciting to me because it's not just another book about a single artist, designer, or tastemaker. Instead, it's an in-depth look at the field that really does a good job of positioning jewelry as part of the larger cultural milieu. Can you share with us a bit about how you considered gender as you conceived of and wrote this book?
Yeah, I think gender is a concept that is sort of changing at the moment. We're kind of in a gender fluid age, really, and a lot of jewelry is becoming unisex, which I think is a good thing in a way. And so I wanted to explore that. And in the book, I remember interviewing Grayson Perry about the idea of gender. And he said that men are the subject and women are the object, which really made me start thinking about how we wear jewelry and how plainness sometimes is considered to be intelligent and something we should aim for. But actually, that means that sometimes decoration and jewellery, by definition, is considered to be sort of less highbrow. So I kind of dispute that in the book, and I sort of tie jewellery to politics and history and economics, because I think it's a vessel for the age we're in. And so some women in jewellery have been very powerful, and, like Elizabeth I we have here, she stayed unmarried as the Virgin Queen so she could hold on to power. And at this kind of time in history, if women were married, their power automatically sort of transferred to their husband. So, she was very clever about it. She used pearls to sort of show a sort of divine energy. And so jewellery at this point was used to separate you from the hoi polloi, to sort of say, I'm connected to sort of a higher energy, really. So I love the fact that women had to be inventive at this time to show their power, and jewellery was often a big way of them doing that.
And more recently, I think that you talk about Coco Chanel.
Yeah, so Chanel also was a huge rebel at a time where, again, high society women were told to wear certain things at certain times of the day. She mixed sort of faux jewellery. Here she's wearing fake pearls. She mixed faux jewellery with high jewellery and kind of really revolutionised comfort in terms of fashion and jewellery. This is a necklace / headpiece, which was transformable. And she, during her lifetime, she only produced one high jewellery collection in 1932. And when she produced that, she had this massive reaction by the dealers in Paris because she showed it in her front room, which was considered absolutely, not something you did in those days. It was much too informal. So she just went against all the known rules and she just did whatever she wanted. And I just think she's a fantastic role model in terms of going against what society has told you is your sort of place.
I was telling a friend about this panel and she rolled her eyes and said, another discussion on women in jewelry, but there is really so much to say, not just about women as designers, but also women as artists, collectors, writers, curators, and I'm sure I'm leaving some off that list. But why do you think we're still having this conversation in 2021?
I think because women wear jewelry, there's been always a sort of political battlefield. Women's bodies have always been something that, have been fought over in different ways. And some women I talk to sort of declare that they don't wear jewellery as a sort of really proudly. And when you ask them when I've asked them why, I think it's this kind of, this connection to plainness and intelligence. I just feel you can be fiercely intelligent and absolutely bedecked in jewellery at the same time. It doesn't have to be mutually exclusive. And I think sometimes the idea of jewellery to people who don't necessarily understand its power feels like a silly sort of vapid thing. But, you know, some jewellery changes history, it changes the world. And I'm a huge fan of, like, if you don't necessarily agree with that, then read Coveted, we'll have a chat about it.
Jessica, what do you think?
Well, I just, you know, like Mel was saying, you know, it's not, you know, my clients are really powerful self-purchasing women, and I'm a woman designing for women. And I think I understand how a jewel should feel on the body and how it should make you feel. And yeah, I mean, I just agree with Mel that I just think jewelry can be really powerful. And I agree that some people think, they're like, oh, I don't do jewelry, or especially they'll say, oh, to me, they'll say, I don't do diamonds. And usually I try and help, you know, change their minds on that. But yeah, I mean, I think it's a conversation we're going to keep having as well, which I think is great.
And Jessica, your company, it's all female senior leadership, isn't it?
Yeah, so we're pretty much, you know, we've definitely got some boys in here, but it's mostly female leadership and all the way down to the workshop, which is great.
Jessica, I so love reading in Mel's book about your party jacket ring. For those who don't know what it is, can you tell us a bit about this design and how, for you, and I'm sure for your clients, it shifts the balance of power as it plays with themes of choice, identity, and power?
Yeah, so I started my business many moons ago now, essentially recycling. And that's how this whole concept has evolved. And the party jacket is the concept of taking the original ring and then adding your own layer. So there are so many reasons why something cannot be changed. You know, essentially it could be emotional, monetary, family reasons. But with this party jacket idea, we can take an original ring without changing. You know, if it's a signed piece, I'm not going to want to like take apart some amazing signed piece. But if we can add a layer to it, which we can do with the jacket, then someone can add their own personality and story. You know, and the woman you were in your 20s when you got an engagement ring is not necessarily the woman that you are in your 40s. And, you know, another great way to use the party jacket is when you've been gifted family jewelry. And in England, I mean, not so much in New Zealand does that happen, but in England, there's a lot of family jewelry, a lot of mother-in-laws that have given beautiful rings. And the image on the right, you can see we've actually used an old Victorian brooch and then a diamond engagement ring, and then they fit together. So it's just a great use of a ring because the other day I was reading that over £6 billion of jewelry is unworn in safes in the UK. So for me, if I can just get a little bit of that jewelry back out and being worn, then I feel that's a job well done.
Yeah, great to see this jewelry coming out and being worn, but you actually do more than just repurpose the rings, right?
Yeah, so repurposing of the rings is a little part, but we do like full bespoke. So you could come to me. So this is a great example of a woman who came to me with her mother's 1950s pearls, and she said it made me feel like a 1950s housewife, but not in a good way. And then she also had an old diamond ring that she'd never worn. So we made the pendant out of all the diamonds. You can see they're all old cuts. And then we restrung the pearls randomly with like an olive green silk thread. And then I got her a gold chain. And then she had this kind of very serious pendant on one side with all the diamonds and a ruby. And then the other side is this happy, smiley face with modern oval cut diamonds. And essentially then out of the diamond clasp from the pearls, we made a bracelet. So she kind of, you know, started building a collection of jewelry out of the pieces that she had. So, you know, it's the kind of the dream recycling, remodeling kind of project and fun.
I love that. It looks so modern. You wouldn't realize that it was an old, you know, being refashioned, and it would just have such a personal meaning to the wearer. That's beautiful.
To her, it was her mother's piece, and then, you know, another family piece, and then she was like, I'm so proud to hand this down to my daughter, and then that's, you know, generations of jewelry, which is great.
I love that. Melanie offers readers some staggering statistics on self-purchasing women, and it sounds like these are many of your clients, Jessica. These are women who aren't waiting for a friend, a husband, a lover to buy jewelry for them, but are instead buying jewelry that suits their own wants, needs, desires. A few of the jewelers that Melanie wrote about speak to a $10,000 sweet spot. Here at the MFA, our collection has been largely impacted by women with a clear taste and vision who have either donated or made works in the MFA's collection, and it's exciting to think about this as a collecting trend. Frank, this brought to mind some of the great collectors of the 20th century, like the Duchess of Windsor, Elizabeth Taylor, and Bunny Mellon. Can you share with us some of the insights about these collectors?
Yes, I would love to. And just to sort of echo what Jessica was saying about repurposing and remaking jewelry, there's a long tradition of women remaking jewels. You inherit something, it's from a previous era, not a style that you love. And again, if it's not an important sign piece, or sometimes even when it was an important sign piece, things were dismantled and refashioned into more contemporary jewels of the day. So we see that a lot, and we still encourage auction buyers to see past maybe a design that they don't love. They might see a great stone in a maybe a chunky 80s ring that doesn't really suit their style, but look at that stone and think about how you could reimagine it. You could go to a great jeweler and have them design something new and fresh with that same gemstone. Because of the intrinsic value, those stones are always going to be recycled and repurposed. So I love that idea. And Jessica, I thought that design was really fabulous with the pearls. We come up against a lot of ladies who are not so loving their pearls anymore, and I think there's lots of things that they could do with them. But to talk about true collectors, you have to start with the Duchess of Windsor. We sold her collection here at Sotheby's in 1987, and at the time was the largest, the highest value collection ever sold at auction. It was later eclipsed by several others, but at the time it was pretty groundbreaking to achieve such a huge amount of money. And she really was a collector, not a shopper. There are people that shop for jewelry for special occasions or for a special outfit, or they just want a certain colored stone. Maybe it's a birthstone, or to celebrate an occasion, the birth of a child, or a special anniversary or birthday. But true collectors are looking for things that are going to hold value, increase in value, and an iconic design from the great houses. No one did that more than the Duchess of Windsor, and I think pretty much every piece of jewelry she owned was bespoke for her in collaboration with the houses. Whether it was Cartier, as you see with this fabulous iconic pin. I know we heard iconic a lot, but this one really is. This one, I think, is right now in the Museum of Natural History at Marion Faisal's beautiful show called Beautiful Creatures.
I was just going to say that, Frank, people can see this one now.
They can go up until this weekend. I think the show closes this weekend. It's been open for quite some time, and it is a beautiful show of all animal jewels, and this is one of the most important from the Duchess of Windsor's collection. But she had just an incredible number of unique bespoke pieces in her collection. She worked with Belperron. As you saw, the chalcedony pieces, the necklace and the cuff bracelets were sold in 87, and then we just sold them again about 4 years ago, I think, and the set brought over $1 million. So, and tying back to Belperron, the Duchess of Windsor was a great customer of Belperron's. And when her auction came up in the 80s, people had kind of forgotten about Suzanne Belperron. And I think there were 14 pieces in the auction, and only 2 or 3 of them were actually attributed to Suzanne Belperron. So that auction really set off a little bit of a renewed interest in Suzanne Belperron. She really was quite something, the Duchess of Windsor, and had fabulous jewels, fabulous taste. Another great collector here was Bunny Mellon, an American heiress, as we all know, and a real tastemaker, not just in terms of jewelry, but also garden design. She designed the garden, the rose garden at the White House for the Kennedys. She was an interior design tastemaker for sure, in her kind of low key, mixing high and low, and everything sort of looked like she'd brought it down from the attic. But in terms of jewelry, I would say Schlumberger was her greatest, a true friend and she was a real patron of Schlumberger even before he joined Tiffany and Company. The picture you see here are some beautiful jeweled compacts in the form of a melon and then covered in turquoise and amethyst and peridot. These were just compacts that would open up with a little mirror and some powder, and this is something she would have just carried around in her handbag, created specifically for her by Schlumberger. They spent a lot of time together. They were really, truly dear friends. And she ended up her entire collection of Schlumberger. I think there were about 180 pieces, ended up at the Museum of Fine Art in the Virginia Museum of Fine Art in Richmond. The piece here, the flower pot, is particularly personal. Schlumberger literally took just an old terracotta pot from her potting shed from her greenhouse, and then wrapped it in that gold mesh, and then built the flower around it. So the flower could come off and be worn as a brooch, or you could mount it on this beautiful object. And Bunny Mellon was known to just kind of line up a lot of her Schlumberger brooches on a windowsill where she could look at them as objects. A lot of them weren't necessarily worn on a regular basis, but they were loved and appreciated. So really a collector of the highest degree. And she just loved working with them and collaborating and coming up with these beautiful bespoke things. This lovely necklace, this was a Cartier necklace, all made with old European stones. This we suspect may have been a wedding present because the receipt looked to be right around the time she married Paul Mellon, but we're not sure. But really, what a magnificent jewel. So just a great collection. And at that time, her collection brought around $43 million. Which for a collection like that was quite a good price to fetch.
We were able to add 2 pieces to the MFA's collection in those sales. We have the Dahlia Compact and the Sea Urchin Clock now at the MFA. They were our first objects by Schlumberger. I hadn't put together the melon box and Bunny Mellon before you just said that. That's pretty good.
Well, what was interesting, when we did the sale, we had just a tiny handful of Schlumberger objects that we were permitted to sell at auction, like the compact. There were some picture frames and some desk accessories, but her will specifically stated the Schlumberger jewelry all went to the VMFA. So that's why none of those things came to auction. But the objects we did sell.
Virginia is very lucky to have those.
Oh,
Melanie and Jessica, I'm curious to... I know, right? I'm curious to hear your thoughts here too. Melanie, in your research, and Jessica, in your business, what observations do you make about the way women buy and collect jewelry?
I think women tend to be in a position to buy and collect serious jewelry, tend to be sort of a bit older. They're quite established in their careers. You know, they have disposable income, and they probably have quite a lot of important pieces from bigger houses, and once they've done that, they tend to go to more independent designers for sort of bespoke pieces, and to have this, as we were saying with Frank, this collaboration between a designer and sort of thoughts that they have, which they want to be amplified in terms of jewellery. So I find as you get older as a collector, you tend to go for bigger pieces. You tend to go for sort of big single pieces over tiny bits of stacking jewellery. And I've noticed that over the years, talking to lots of collectors of different ages. I think you get more confident in your style, and you have probably a bit more money to spend, and you kind of know what you don't want and you know what you really like. So I think, you know, sort of designers like Jessica, collectors kind of align with designers in terms of design philosophy and artistic practice. And it's an experience, you know, they want to go and be part of someone's universe. And I think that collaboration tends to create some of the best jewelry we tend to see.
I mean, 70% of my clients are female clients, and they're self-purchasing clients, which I love. And they definitely have like a journey or a process they go through where they might come in, they introduce the brand, they buy a couple of pieces, then they get the confidence, and then we start doing like the really amazing bespoke pieces. And last year we did a pair of earrings that were upward of £1 million, and it was a self-purchasing woman buying them for a special occasion. And, you know, and she comes back and collects every year, and sometimes she's like, well, what else can I, you know, what can I get? And when the kind of, she's got something from each collection, then that's when bespoke comes into its own. And I just love having that self-purchasing female client. It's easy for me to speak to that woman.
What makes someone a collector in your mind, as opposed to a client or a shopper?
I think a collector returns. A collector also has jewelry all from different eras and genres. As you said, Mel, they've gone to the different big houses, they've probably bought some jewelry at auction. And then what I work with them is like how you really curate that collection and how you then style it and wear it. You know, I love that you can wear, you know, Victorian or 1920s with like a ball and chain or a big diamond, or, you know, like now I'm wearing pearls but upside down with a diamond, and, you know, bringing back that kind of mixing of genres. I think that's what collectors do really well. And they also have a little possession obsession, which I also can kind of relate to.
Yeah, I also think it's about intelligence. I think collectors intelligently put a body of work together from various places and times and artists, which every piece kind of speaks to them in a very unique way. And when you look at collections from serious collectors, it does feel like something, you know, that can go into a museum as a body of work. You know, you can see their parts of their life reflected back through the jewelry. So I think it's a lot more complex than just buying lots of things. It ebbs and flows like you know, like the work itself.
I have to say, in terms of collectors versus shoppers, there's almost, as a collector myself of something else, not jewelry, but there's a tremendous amount of relief when you realize that as a collector, you will never be finished. I think that is first and foremost. Whereas shoppers do tend to, like I have found in my career, 40 to 60 is kind of the age of the shopping for jewelry, because before 40, you can't really afford so much great jewelry. And then after 60, you've got plenty, and maybe you're going to fewer events and things. So there's like that shopper's window. But a collector, I have women buying jewelry for themselves that are 90 years old. And they still want to acquire, right? They want a new thing. Maybe filling a gap in their collection that they didn't have, or something that they've been looking for 20 years. That's kind of the fun part of auction. You can't get it right away. You've got to wait until it comes up, and then you also have to be the winning bidder. So I love both shoppers and collectors for different reasons.
And how has social media changed this? How has it changed the way designers interact with clients or potential clients, and the way that people collect?
I think for me, like all the social media is kind of one of these great digital tools that makes it really easy for me to speak to someone in New York, someone in London, someone in Sydney, all at the same time. And then what Instagram also does, and Frank, you were saying it the other day, it makes you can get up really close and personal with the jewel. You can see how it's worn. You know, I'm wearing it with a t-shirt versus, you know, if you're going to wear it to a black tie event. And yeah, I mean, social media, live chat, WhatsApp's been a huge kind of great, amazing selling tool for me, and to be able to get my kind of designs out there. You know, this is all styled by the client. So, you know, it means, yeah, all different people. And, you know, then also a piece like this, I will have someone saying, I want that diamond, and what are you going to make for me with it? So, yeah, it's incredible.
And I have to say, with you know, having gone through what the world has seen in the last 18 months with COVID, without technology, we would not have kept the business going the way we have. And the jewelry industry has remained very strong throughout the past 18 months, because I think with technology, it's better to experience this jewel on someone's iPhone video, where you're seeing the front and the back and getting the extreme detail and the sparkle and the life of the stone. You're getting so much more there than you would have from the print catalog that we would have mailed you a couple of years ago. So it's really gone a long way to give people confidence in buying sight unseen. It's tremendous. We've sold pieces in the millions sight unseen. You know, just because people have that confidence, and it really, a lot of that is because of the technology.
There's such a great community that's emerged around jewelry on social media, and Instagram in particular. It's really exciting to see every day what's happening and what's changing. Melanie, as jewelry scholarship changes and we see more thematic projects like yours, like Coveted, what concepts related to women in jewelry are you most excited about?
I mean, I suppose the book in itself kind of talks about the transition of power. I think power is quite a key theme. And I think jewellery often sort of is a vessel for power. So I'd say, we're talking about a transition and back again from east to west, from men to women and back again. We're talking about unisex jewellery. This is a Boucheron collection, which is unisex, which, everyone can wear. It's kind of democratized what people feel they can wear. And I think it just makes us all gives us more freedom to be who we really want to be. I know men who really want to wear big diamonds, but who've always felt that they shouldn't. And women who want to wear androgynous clothes. We're heading for a time, we're in a time where there's more personal freedom than ever before. And I think jewellery is a great way to display your style and taste and humour and intelligence. So for me, this necklace by Grace and Perry, looking at sort of masculinity and how that's changed over the years, is a great example of just wearing something which provokes conversation and which is a piece of art on the body. So yeah, I think there's this transition, and the ultimate transition for me with jewellery is jewellery being acknowledged as an art form equal to sculpture and painting and other fine arts, where at times it has been sort of slightly relegated to the decorative art category. So for me, that sort of transition of power is one of the most welcome elements, I think, of modern times.
And we're sitting here the day after the Met Gala, and we saw some men wearing jewelry last night on the red carpet. Do you think the red carpet and seeing men wearing jewelry on Instagram and social media has impacted the way jewelry is thought about?
Yeah, I mean, the red carpet, like anything, is, it reflects kind of the sort of barometer of society. And I love the fact that men are wearing more jewelry. And obviously they wore a lot of jewelry at one stage in Western history. I'd love to see more men wear jewellery. I think in the East, men are much freer to wear jewellery than they are in the West. But bring it on. I think everyone should wear much more jewellery, frankly. That's, if I was going to start a campaign, that would be what it would basically be about. Wear as much as possible.
Bring it on. Jessica, I'm curious to hear more about your collaboration with the Haas brothers. What I've seen is fanciful and fun. It's this great blending of high jewelry and contemporary art. Can you share with us a bit about how that came about?
Yeah, so this collaboration we launched late last year, and I met Nikki and Simon probably about 8 years ago and commissioned them to do a incredibly beautiful floor lamp that we have here in our Mayfair shop. And it's a weird giant bronze tree-like thing, and it has kind of like jellyfish blooms on it. I fell in love with them. I fell in love with their work. We've been talking literally for years. It was like this 8-year-long conversation that we had. And then I think maybe COVID just came along, and we both had a little bit, not free time, but, some time to think, and we were like, let's actually do something. And so this is a huge, giant, colossal marble bath carved, the most beautiful, you can't really get the volume of it, but the inspiration from this, we then turned into rings and earrings and a cuff. Just the translation from their work to my work was very easy, very natural, very genuine, which, it was just such a great, easy kind of collaboration. I must admit, I had a crisis of confidence just before it kind of went live, which was, I think we were still in lockdown, and I was like, oh my goodness, what have I done? This is crazy. But when you put that jewelry on, it's really beautiful and easy to wear, and we sold out before the end of the year. Here's Rosie wearing a pair of the earrings, as well as them being kind of fanciful and very inspired by their art, they're still really beautiful. When you wear them, they're beautiful. They're great on the body. And then Frank, when you're talking about Bunny Nellen and her idea of having objet, brooches and jewelry, when you're not wearing it, it's still a beautiful thing that you want to look at. And I think that's where this jewelry box idea came from. And we kind of embroider all the inside, it's got these incredible legs. It's like a friend, and they can take on these personalities, and it's something I was very attached to. And it was a huge shipping operation actually to America for this guy, but it was an amazing, super creative, fun project. And the first I've ever done of anything like this, working with artists.
I love that jewelry box. How big is it?
It's about this big. Like he would sit on your desk or like on your, he would sit somewhere close by in your bedroom.
Jessica, you've been busy during COVID, during lockdown. You've also created a whole new floor in your townhouse in Mayfair dedicated to bridal jewelry. Can you tell us how you weave together tradition and modernity for the 21st century bride?
Yeah, I've actually just had to tell all the builders to be quiet for an hour. I was like, you've got an hour, you've got to down tools. We're kind of on the mad rush. So, we've always done like big, diamond engagement rings, but what I wanted to do was kind of create a collection and a space, and that you could come in and you could feel the full experience of like this Mayfair kind of house, but, have a entry level of like £2,500 so people can come in, I don't know, when you're in your 20s or 30s, you're not, as you said, Frank, you're kind of getting into your serious money spending 40s to 60s. So I just wanted to open up a new part of our world, and Love Beyond is this new campaign that we're actually launching today, and then opening up the space. So yeah, we kind of have something for every bride, the first time bride, the second time, and the third.
I love the advertisements. Those are beautiful images.
Thank you.
Mel, 2020 was the year of your book, Coveted, and this year you've been collaborating with Frank in Sotheby's, New York on Black and Brilliant, a selling exhibition at Sotheby's, the first ever selling exhibition dedicated to Black contemporary jewelry artists and designers. Can you tell us how this project came about and what we can expect to see?
Yeah, I mean, Frank and I were actually talking about this talk, and I decided to pitch an idea which I'd had in my mind for a while. Because I was talking to artists and designers, during the events of, the George Floyd events and everything that followed after that. And I just felt there's a sense of hopelessness with Black jewelers about the future. And if you can't sort of walk down the street without getting shot, you definitely start to think, life feels a bit different. And so I thought, what can I do to sort of do something, help somebody to sort of feel that there is, the talent out there is phenomenal, and sometimes people don't have the resources or the access to the collectors that we're talking about here. So I pitched this idea to Frank and he said yes, and it has taken on a mind of its own, this whole show. It opens on Friday, on the 17th of September, and we have 21 designers of African descent who are showing their work. Everyone has made a piece who's living. So we've got at least a third of the exhibition is completely new. And they've all gone up a notch in terms of creativity and scale and materials. It's phenomenal. I mean, some of the pieces are, beyond what I hoped we would get. And it's been a fantastic experience for all of us. We've really created this sort of community, sort of talking to each other about what they were making, and the other bidders have been great. And so it's been like, for me, apart from the book, which we're talking about today, it's been one of the experiences of my lifetime so far. I've absolutely loved every second of it. So yeah, it's kind of come from the book and everything that's followed that. So I feel, I knew the book would change things, but I didn't realize it would, have this ripple effect in other areas for me and other people I know.
And how did you and Frank work to choose the designers that were going to be featured in the exhibition?
Well, I think we looked at what we consider to be, the best working designers who are Black today, and we went through their work and we considered who they were and how they would work together as a group. And Frank was very open, and I had lots of suggestions, and it just sort of came together quite naturally. And everyone's slightly different. There's nobody who's kind of similar. Everyone's very different. We've got a huge range of styles. But yeah, it all sort of came together. It's this big jigsaw. So, I mean, people keep asking me what my favorite pieces are, and I just don't think that's possible. I just love it it's pretty much all in its own way wonderful. So yeah, it's been a great project to work on.
It's been really an incredible experience working with Melanie. And as she said, this show has taken on a life of its own. It's almost as though we've just had to keep up with it. Once we confirmed it and had the dates and had the list of jewelers and selected all the pieces for the show, each designer offered 3 pieces. So we have a total of 60 pieces in the show. And it's just been, I can't even express how wonderful it's been and how emotional many conversations have been with these artists. I had a chance to get to know so many of them very well at this point, talking to them every week. The local ones, we've shot some videos and been able to go spend, a full day at the studio with Johnny Nelson or Lorraine West, Cheryl Jones here in New York City. And it's just been overwhelming in many, many ways. And we're installing now and opening on Friday. So it's very, very exciting project.
That's great. So you have this opening up September 17th. What other sales are happening at Sotheby's this fall?
Well, we have, this is our season, so we're just kicking it off. And one of the reasons we're doing this show in September is we wanted to sort of have it before the auction season starts. But my season will be here in October, Important Jewels in New York City. Then we'll have Magnificent Jewels in Geneva in November, Hong Kong in October, and then Magnificent Jewels again here in December in New York City. And the thing I'm most excited about right now, beyond Brilliant in Black, as I move into the season, is we have a very special collection of one-of-a-kind vintage Bulgari, a woman who was a great client of Bulgari. And this collection really just has some spectacular things. I'm just going to show you a couple of them right here. This is one of the...
You just have them sitting beside you.
I just have them sitting in my office. That's what it's like around here. I just always have, fabulous jewels. This is from the Monete collection, the ancient coin jewelry that they make, but I've never seen a cuff bracelet like this fully covered in baguette diamonds. I mean, this is truly a one-of-a-kind piece from the collection. Oh, I turned the upside down there. And just magnificent things. This pearl choker, you can see what was done with the coin here.
Look at that, the asymmetrical coin.
Yep, very sort of misshapen and then set with the, just that's very, I'm sorry, I'm having trouble with the orientation, very glamorous look. A choker. I think maybe I could have used that today. And one of my other favorite pieces from the collection is this. I've never quite seen anything like it. These are cameos carved in emeralds.
Love that.
In this necklace.
That's my kind of thing.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah. I love a carved stone.
Yeah. I mean, this is really special. Comes with matching earrings. And then the last thing I'll show you is what might be the most substantial Bulgari Monete necklace I've ever seen.
Wow.
These are...
Amazing.
Wow.
You could pull that one off, Frank.
Yeah,
Yep,
I think I could wear
definitely,
this one.
Yeah,
I might wear this
You could
around the
totally pull
office
that one
today.
off. Yeah, you should.
You should have been wearing that the whole time.
Look at the size of those coins. It's incredible. And of course, but you need a few baguette diamonds everywhere. So these are just all great pieces from the 70s and 80s and lots more of it. So it's always exciting. Again, the eye of the collector. It's about a woman who knew what she liked, and she liked big, bold things. This is not an easy piece to just throw on and wear. These jewels have chutzpah. So it's fun to see the eye of the collector and represent her taste level and her vision too. So that will be coming in December in New York.
This has been fantastic. We're just out of time, but my thanks to Jessica McCormack, Melanie Grant, and Frank Everett for their brilliant contributions to today's event, and to Sotheby's and Intelligence Squared for putting it all together. Brilliant in Black, a jewelry renaissance, will be open to the public at Sotheby's, New York from September 17th to the 26th. Curated by Melanie and Frank, it will feature around 60 pieces by 21 of the world's leading black jewelry designers, spanning a range of periods from the 1950s to today. And you'll find Jessica McCormack's townhouse tucked away in the heart of Mayfair in London at 7 Carlos Place. There's an image of it there. And you can find Melanie's book and purchase Melanie's book, Coveted, Art and Innovation in High Jewelry, published by Phaidon. Keep an eye out for a very special collection of vintage Bulgari jewelry, which will be part of Sotheby's magnificent jewels sale in December. I hope you enjoyed watching, and thank you to everyone for joining us.